VocalEye Almost Live Zoom Capture Photography Festival, hosted by Amy Amantea, with special guests Emmy Lee Wall and Sarah Wang.
Welcome to this VocalEye Almost Live event. My name is Amy Amantea, my pronouns are she, her, and I am the Associate Director for VocalEye. I'm your host for these Almost Live events, and I am a member of the blind community, and I am thrilled to be a member of this community. It's been a real gift in my life. Just so you all know, you've all been a real gift in my life. I want to extend a big thank you, of course, to folks who have made contributions, both financial and, of course, in the capacity of writing testimonial letters. So we very much appreciate that. There is a link posted in the chat if you feel like you want to support VocalEye in making accessible materials, accessible art for the community. We would love that. You can also support by writing a short testimonial about how this programming has impacted you week after week. So those are the offers, and I love reading the testimonials. So those are our offers for folks to help support the organization. If you are watching this particular event on our YouTube channel, you have the opportunity, and I hope you take it, to just hover over and click on those like and subscribe buttons. Those I think would really, really help us out. So maybe consider that. VocalEye is broadcasting to you all from the traditional and stolen lands of the Coast Salish peoples, in particular the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Now, I have had the privilege and the learning curve, of course, of doing 118 land acknowledgements since we started this almost live programming. And I was in a recent workshop where I was learning about what they called a decolonization toolkit. And one of the things that we were challenged to do as a group was to think about our land acknowledgements, because land acknowledgements have been around now here in Vancouver, and I hope in other places you're experiencing them for a couple of years, but in the arts, they've been doing them for quite a long time. They traditionally sound like the same thing every week. And so what happens is that people tend to sometimes gloss over them, and they are really, really important, an important part of reconciliation with Indigenous communities. This is why I do something different every week, so that hopefully I grab your attention. So in the spirit of that, I wanted to share with you why we do a land acknowledgement, what I learned about this. So this is a practice that goes back through generations within Indigenous communities. So when somebody, if you imagine several communities living close together, Indigenous communities, when you came into the territories of another community on somebody else's land, you shared who you were, who your family lineage was, and you paid respect to the host nations of the lands that you were on. This was kind of looked at as the law of the land. So if we, I don't know, translate that into today, just for argument's sake, it would be like somebody living in Burnaby coming to North Vancouver and saying, "Hi, my name is so and so. I live in Burnaby. My family is from Scotland, and whatever, and because you come onto my territories," and vice versa. So there's this real healthy tradition of this happening between Indigenous folks, and as settlers, because almost all of our lands in British Columbia are unceded, so stolen lands. As settlers, we are asked now by Indigenous communities to bring this practice into the work that we do. To recognize the land is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territories you reside on or that you're visiting, and a way of honoring the Indigenous peoples who have been living and working on these lands and taking care of them since time immemorial. So I thought I'd share with you a little bit about why we do a land acknowledgement and the importance of them in sort of the history. That's some of the stuff that I learned earlier this week. So that's what I'm offering in my land acknowledgement this week. Welcome to this Wednesday, April the 26th, 2023. And tonight we're proud to offer you our almost live event number 118. This is the Capture Photography Festival. Here and Now is the title of the festival. And we've got some special guests with us in the space. So I'm going to bring Emmy into the space, and I'm going to bring Sarah into the space. And folks may remember Sarah Wang, who has been part of our VocalEye team for a while now. And Emmy is joining us as well to talk about the Capture Photography Festival. Emmy, welcome.
Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you for that beautiful land acknowledgement. It's really moving.
Thank you. I'm really trying, I'm really trying to embrace and do my own learning.
Yeah, and I think
around
you
them, right? Trying
actually
something different.
going
And
to a workshop and then immediately putting into practice, that's a workshop well done.
yeah, it's every time I take a workshop, I try and implement something from it every single time. So there you go. Yeah. So Emmy, I would love to sort of get some background on who you are before we start to talk about the festival. So who's Emmy? Emmy Lee Wall. Who's Emmy Lee
Okay,
Wall?
that's a big question. So I am the executive director of Capture Photography Festival, and I started in 2019. So this is our fourth festival, or my fourth festival at Capture. But two of them were virtual pretty much. So this is my second kind of like live festival. So that's really exciting. And before that, I worked at the Vancouver Art Gallery off and on for about 14 years. I say off and on because I took a very extended maternity leave for 2.5 years and they were quite irritated, but I eventually went back. So I've sort of been in the curatorial art community now for something like almost 20 years, 18 years. So yeah, that's a long time. And Capture Photography Festival has existed since 2013. So this is our 10th anniversary, which is super exciting.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
What is special about the 10th anniversary?
Well, I mean, I think it's such a milestone for us. So we started in 2013. Our festival founder is Kim Spencer Nairn, who has actually moved on, and she's now the director of Ballet BC. But her vision was really just to kind of celebrate the lens-based practitioners that live and work in Vancouver. So there are a group of photo conceptual artists, so artists who really kind of look at photography differently, that really start with an idea as opposed to kind of snapping something pre-existing in the world. And they often construct their photographs quite meticulously. So they really control and art direct every single aspect of their photographs. So there's a group of photographers that live and work in Vancouver that are really internationally renowned. And so I think she really wanted to celebrate our own. And so for the 10th anniversary, we concocted a way to kind of celebrate the artists living and working in Vancouver. And that's this exhibition that Sarah is going to be giving the described tour of, called Here and Now. And the idea was to commission 10 artists who live and work in Vancouver to create new works that respond in some way to the city. And I was really thinking of the city in the broadest possible, most expansive terms. So not so much a landscape, but landscape in terms of like the cultural fabric, the social history, the different narratives here, the different peoples here. So thinking of a city as a multifaceted kind of living, breathing, growing organism, so much more than the buildings and the land that we're sitting on.
Mm-hmm. Um, Emmy, for folks, I mean, so photography may be new to a lot of folks that live with blindness.
Sure, yeah.
And even when I think of photography, all I think about is like I point my camera, I hit click, and that's the photo. But that's not what this is. So can you like sort of unpack what
Yeah.
capture photography is? You
Yeah, I
started
mean,
to, but let's go there.
so I think photography for many people is just that, what you're describing, which is very much like capturing a moment that you're passing by, you react spontaneously and quickly, and you sort of use your camera in the moment, and it's a bit unpredictable. It's something that you happen upon. What Vancouver-based artists that are really well known, so this group of artists called the Vancouver Photo Conceptual Artists, what they're really known for is actually constructing photographs meticulously from start to finish. So in the same way that you might snap a photograph really quickly, you still in that split second have to make a lot of decisions: where to hold your camera, what to point it at, what to keep in the frame and what to keep out of the frame. All those decisions, they could be constructed as well over time. So many of the photographers that live and work in Vancouver, they actually almost like create a photograph in the same way you might create a film. So, there are stage actors, or maybe they're not professional actors, but people who are posed in certain ways. The lighting is really controlled, the costume is controlled, the set deck is controlled. There's a whole series of decisions that are made in order to produce a result very much akin with filmmaking, I would say. So that's one aspect of some of the photography that's happening in the exhibition. And another way that I would say photography might be a little deceptive, or you might think of it a little bit differently, is the fact that in many of the photographs that are on view at Here and Now, there's a lot of digital stitching going on. So the final image is not the result of a single snapshot. It's a result of many, many compiled images. So for example, in Karen Zalamea's work, who's one of the artists, she takes a real panorama of a neighborhood, which she visits a lot. She's of Filipino descent, and she goes there because it's a cultural food hub. And this area is sort of in jeopardy of being redeveloped, and those buildings and those businesses being, well, basically having to come down or not being around anymore. And she wanted to really memorialize this area and this block of businesses that really are, a lifeline for her community, for her cultural community, both in terms of food and products that she has accessible, that are made accessible to her there. And so she took, I think it was something like 70 photographs and digitally stitched them together. So you would not actually be able to tell that they were digitally stitched together, except for, it's almost an impossible shot. It's so long. Right. It's a panorama. And so she meticulously stitched this together. And the results, when you actually look at the photograph, it looks just as if it's one. But so just to kind of give a sense of the different ways that artists are working. There's one artist called Ian Wallace in the exhibition where he has taken a snapshot on a street, but everybody else, there's a lot of staging going on. There's a lot of lighting control. There's a lot of kind of pre-decision making before the actual image is taken, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Some people in this space know that I'm a loose photographer because I don't know how to set things on the camera. It's not accessible for me, and I can't see what I'm taking photos of. But I find the light, and when I see a patch of light, I take a photo of it, and that's how I do that with low vision, and I've actually built a project around that. So, for photography, I feel like I'm just sort of learning about how deep that goes, and how expansive the practice can be, the art form can be. So I think that's a great sort of unpacking of what that is. The exhibition is on right now, currently, yes. Just for another couple of days. You want to just tell us where the exhibition is? And
yeah, it's at a space called the Pendulum Gallery, which is in the lobby of the HSBC building, which is at 885 West Georgia. It's actually right across the street from the Vancouver Art Gallery, so right in the downtown core. And one of the things I like so much about this space is that it's so accessible. For example, there's no admission fee, and there's no, you don't have to walk by some reception desk. So you can just walk into this big open space. It's also, you can actually see it from the exterior. There's large glass windows. So there's lots of kind of street traffic, bike traffic, pedestrian traffic, just kind of wandering by. And I really like the fact that it's such a highly accessible space for so many different kinds of people, especially people who might not want to pay or might not have the means to pay, $25 to go into a contemporary art space.
Are you a photographer, Emmy?
I have no artistic skills whatsoever.
Yeah. Okay, so executive directors, you're writing grants and you're
I very much can appreciate. And a big part of my job is curatorial. So that's sort of how I fell into this position, which is, a lot of people in directorial roles in arts organizations, it's not like they came from management or finance. It's like they ended up doing curatorial work and sort of work their way up into running arts organizations. So I come from that side, not the kind of arts.
What's your process for trying to curate? Because you took 10 artists for this exhibition.
Yeah,
but you probably had more submissions than that, or maybe you didn't.
So it's not a submission process. So some of the festival is. So in the fall, we open our selected exhibitions panel or submissions, and people can submit, and you don't have to have a perfect white gallery space. People have submitted. Once somebody submitted an exhibition in a camper van that was part of Capture. People have submitted in cafes. We're very open to alternative forms of presentation because it's so expensive to have a space, a kind of a pristine gallery space in Vancouver. And we want to make Capture as accessible as possible to as broad an audience as possible. But in terms of the curating that we do, a big part of what we do continually is studio visits. So Chelsea, who is our assistant curator, and myself, we're often kind of reaching out to artists to go learn more about their work, look at what they've been producing, just chat with them really to hear about their ideas. And we do that continually. And then when it came time to produce this exhibition, I thought, what could we really do to celebrate 10 years in Vancouver? And I really wanted to kind of look at how Vancouver has shaped artists and how artists are shaping Vancouver. So it's this reciprocal process, right? You live and work in the city. Surely aspects of living and working here affect you. Also, this history of photographers that have been so dominant in the scene here. You directly see their influence on several of the younger artists who are making work now. And then we commission these 10 artworks, and commissioning work is really different from selecting work that already exists, because you really don't know what you're going to get. It's a big surprise. So we worked with them throughout this process. And there was, for some artists, they just kind of handed us a finished thing and it was great. For some artists, especially some of the more emerging artists, they wanted our feedback. They really wanted to engage with us, hear what we thought was going in a good direction, what we thought wasn't working so well. And so in some ways it was like a little bit more collaborative, which they wanted. So it was a really fun process. And at the end of the day, I think we ended up with 10 really diverse works, both in terms of like the range of artists. So there's an artist in the exhibition who's just graduating from Emily Carr University in May. And there's an artist called Ian Wallace, who's a very senior practitioner. He's in his 70s, really established, internationally renowned. And then there's everything in between. And, we have a lot of artists from different cultural backgrounds in the exhibition. And some of them were like, no, I don't know. I wasn't born here. I don't know if I should be in the exhibition. And I was like, no, that's the whole point. Like, we want to kind of have you participate, to kind of share your voice, to share your experience of moving here when you were like in your teen years. Not a lot of people in Vancouver weren't born and raised here, and we wanted to share that experience as well.
Yeah.
So it's a really diverse group of pictures and artists.
And if folks are living in town, what day does the exhibition close?
Closes on Friday, and we it's
Friday
crazy.
the 28th of April. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, if you happen to be in the downtown core and you want to stop by, I encourage folks to do that. Emmy, is there any last thing that you'd like to share with us before we transition into the tour?
I think it's pretty good. I just really wanted to say thank you so much for this collaboration. And Amy, I've just been listening to your talk. You're such a dynamic, you're really good at this. It's so dynamic.
And I
want
practice.
to say thank you to you, and also to Steph and everybody else at the VocalEye team. And also thank you to Sarah. And I've kind of pre-read your VocalEye script. And so I think everybody's in good hands. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Emmy. I know we're going to transition into the presentation in just a moment, but Sarah, I just want to remind folks of who you are. So I mean, we know that you from our capacity of working with VocalEye, but what is your relationship to the Capture Photography Festival?
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Emmy, as well. So I'm currently the TD Assistant Curator of Engagement with Capture Photography Festival. So I'm focused a little bit more on events and outreach, and especially just seeing, if we can work with our communities as diverse as they are, and also our partner arts organizations. So it's really exciting to be here. It's my first Describe tour, so I'm really excited. And thank you, Amy, for working with me as well on this.
Teamwork makes the dream work. Isn't that what they always say?
That is true.
Something like that.
Yes.
All right, Sarah, is there anything that you would like to say off the top before we just sort of launch into experiencing some of these artworks? Because we're going to experience 5 artists, not all 10. And if people are like, why not all 10? Because it's a lot of labor to have something described to you and to try and make sense of that. It can be overwhelming, can be stimulation overload. So we've chosen 5 artists' work, and that's what we'll focus on. So what would you like to say before we jump into your presentation?
Well, I think the 5 that we chose are very, they give such a great breadth, I think, of exactly what you and Emmy just spoke about, the different practices, the different intentions, the work that went into the finished work, which will all be described to, they're very different. So I think we get a good range of works. And I hope folks can appreciate these works given how different they are, because I know one of my favorites is in it. And before I started studying this exhibition, I didn't know that this would be my favorite. So I learned a lot. So hopefully people will like what we have tonight.
And is this your first year with the festival, Sarah, or how long have you been with the festival?
Yes, this is the first year. So we started last calendar year, but this is the first festival. So it was great learning experience.
And you're jumping in right at the 10th anniversary. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's a great number. I love it.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think if you're ready, we should ask Rick to go ahead and do a screen share here.
Thank you, Rick. Great. So I guess, Amy, I'll just say that this is our first slide, which I'll read out.
It's a title slide, folks.
Title slide, yes. So it just gives us, it grounds us with some information about this show and this event. So it says Capture Photography Festival presents, and it's the title of our event tonight, which is called Highlights from the 2023 featured exhibition titled Here and Now, and it is in partnership with VocalEye.
Wonderful. Always nice to have a little title slide.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here we go. Our first artist.
So we're going to jump into these two works here. So on your screen are two works. The one on the left is called...
Sarah, before you do that, can you just read the caption?
Oh, yes, of course. My apologies. So for these slides, we will have a caption box that just gives some information on the work. So the caption box says, Alexine McLeod, Oscillation, and in parentheses 408 and 80. The year is 2022. Inkjet prints. It's about 91.44 centimeters times 60.96 centimeters, and it's courtesy of the artist and Monty Clark Gallery. We'll explain what each of these are as we do the description.
All right, so we'll have Rick pull up there's two images side by side here, and they're very similar. So we'll have Rick pull up image one. And this one is entitled what, Sarah? Oscillation?
This is Oscillation 408.
408.
Yes.
All right, I'm ready for you.
Okay, thank you. So this is the one that when it is hung in the exhibition, this is the one on the left. And again, this is called Oscillation 408. And Amy, I just wanted to note that we also have Oscillation 880, and because some of their dimensions are the same, just so everyone in the group knows, some of the information might be duplicated. So each of these works is about the height of your legs from hips to feet and the width of about an arm's length, so from shoulder to wrist. The two works, so including this work, are hung side by side, and this format is called a diptych. So a diptych is a word that describes paintings and other works of art that are on two adjacent panels or pieces. Historically, diptychs were often fastened together with a hinge, and they were common in works in churches. So for example, church altarpieces. For the purposes of this set of photographs, there is no hinge, but since they are displayed side by side, we still use that term diptych. So again, on the screen, we're looking at the work that is hung on the left. And now on to the subject matter of the works and what they represent. So both photographs are abstract. They highlight the play between glowing and muted colors with rectangular shapes, sharp lines, and angles that cut through the images from top to bottom. So let's start with the background. So in each of these images, we have a blue rectangular sheet of plastic. It's the farthest away from us, and it looks somewhat like a window on a bright cloudless day. As we move from the back closer to us, we have rectangular pieces of gray cardboard, a few thin gray rods, the sepia colored blocks of wood, and pieces of yellow and orange plastic and glass. All of these cast a warm glow on the rest of the opaque gray pieces. The element that's really fascinating to me, though, are these two rectangular pieces of orange plastic. It could be orange plastic or glass transparencies, but they're positioned so that the narrowest side is actually facing us. And this narrow edge, I'm guessing it's about maybe a centimeter wide, but it is so striking because of the color. It's almost like a neon orange sign, or if, let's say, metal was heated to 1,000 degrees or more, that it just slices through the photograph. It's like it's glowing. And yeah, these pieces of glass, plastic, wood, and cardboard, they are stacked. They're leaned against each other, they're layered, and they're ultimately positioned with intention by the artist. And the items used are everyday building materials that were discarded, such as wood blocks, paneling, plexiglass, and metal rods that the artist Alexine McLeod had to scavenge from local craft shops or industrial suppliers, as these are the materials that are used in the building and rebuilding of the physical architecture of Vancouver. I think it's really poetic that these are the same materials that now construct her image. And after everything is positioned by the artist, she then takes a picture of this assemblage. I'll move on to the physical kind of photography and give a little context of the medium, if that's okay. So you might remember that when I said, like when I read out loud the caption, I said inkjet print. So the printing of this physical photograph is what is known as an inkjet print, which is a print created by a contact-free printer that distributes droplets of ink over a surface to create this image. So most often a print head with nozzles moves across paper, depositing liquid ink in colors like cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, although some professional grade printers can to 12 colors. Many different printer types exist, and they can be used with a wide range of supports, including paper, textiles, and even metals. It was introduced in the 1980s, and the inkjet print became increasingly common in the 1990s. The process, which produces prints that closely resemble photographs made in a dark room, continues to improve in sophistication and is widely used today. And I just want to cite and note that this amazing technical information is provided by the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And if people are interested, I do have some more background and context information on the creation and meaning, but Amy, I don't know if you wanted to.
I mean, before we get to that, Sarah,
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions, because you described this as an abstract.
Yes.
And you know, maybe this one image, because the other one is very similar to this one.
Yes.
So without maybe overwhelming us, we can focus on this one.
Okay.
Because, you know, from my partial sight, what I get is literally like blocks of color. If I think about how we would stack Jenga blocks, or how we would stack Lego blocks or something like that, different shapes, as in rectangle, square, long, thin, short, fat, that kind of idea.
Yes.
Different, and so they're not built on top of each other. They're layered kind of in a 3D way, as well as vertically.
Yes.
So like I don't see any depth, because I have no sense of depth perception. And this orange hot rod bar is like literally like a thin diagonal slice.
Yes.
Through. And these things are, like you said, they're purposefully put in this position. So I can imagine that the artist had to like delicately balance all of these things together.
Yes. Right? And I just wanted to say, like, I actually have exactly the same experience with you, in that I thought that the materials that she was like layering was actually very close to one another, if not touching one another.
Yeah.
Then I saw another photograph of, I think maybe she was in her studio or in a gallery, where there was a side view. So we're looking at this photograph from a frontal view. So when we move a little bit to the side, I was actually shocked, because every like layer was, I would say, a good foot, if not more, away.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So from a front perspective, it really flattens things out. Like you can still tell what is in front of each other, but you can tell that they are actually quite removed.
So it's like a visual mind warp a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Like the depth is really, really
And
constrained.
I think that's great context, Sarah, because this is a photograph of like an installation of all of this stuff. And
Yes.
so from your experience when you saw the installation or the side view, how large an installation do you think this is?
From what I remember, I would say it was probably a good, let me just think how I would say this. Like I would say it's a good like 3 to 4 meters in
Okay. So it's
in
huge. That's like a meter is like, I don't know,
it's like
5 foot person. It's,
yeah, it's a 2.5.
it's a tween. It's the height of a tween.
Exactly.
So it's yeah, that's big.
Mm-hmm.
That takes up a lot of floor space to be able to put this together.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then again, now it's in front of us as a flat image, right?
Yeah.
Which is really, I think, a good play on the installation.
Well, you mentioned the color sepia, and I'm wondering if you can tell those of us who don't know what sepia is.
Yeah, so that's a great point because I don't quite use this cut color a lot, but it's kind of it's a bit of a beige-ish cut color. I would just say that it's usually used when people are trying to describe things that are very neutral. So to me, it's slightly brighter than beige, but it's still a little bit of a, think of like a latte almost, or like that dimming of the light as the sun goes down. There's a little bit of that. So it's a bit of a brownish but also beige-ish kind of a color.
Okay, that's helpful because I was thinking it was green.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Yes. I'm
Okay,
sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
good to know.
And I use that word because the wood really gave me that feel. It wasn't a very light color wood, but it wasn't very dark. So I used that word as a describer.
Wonderful. So you have some like artists like what the artist was saying, right?
Yeah. Yes. So I just have a little bit of background and context information because I really, really love this work and I love what it represents, I think. So I know we have folks from, around Canada and the US, and this is going to be probably a little bit new information for those who haven't lived in Vancouver. So for anyone who has lived in Vancouver, light isn't really, I wouldn't say light is the first thing that really comes to mind. For me, our city is really one of very anemic and overcast grays. But the artificial constructions, so these buildings that grow taller and taller with every iteration, it really provides the backdrop to what renowned Vancouver author and art artist Douglas Copeland, who also happens to be now co-chair of the board of directors at Capture, calls this term city of glass, where the natural light, when we have it, is magnified and reflected, and then it's supplemented by the artificial glow that we see in the lights and all urban centers. So Alexine McLeod, what she does is she uses this duo of the window as a backlight, and then in front of the installation is the artificial light of her studio, right, to temper this illuminated atmosphere. So it creates what she calls, and I quote, a push and pull effect of perception and material experience, which is great because that is kind of what oscillation means. So while the composition of this photograph indicates that the artist is present because she had to assemble all of these things, right? The materials and their arrangements are so impermanent and their relationships are in flux. I think, like a lot of the buildings here, are in relation or in flux to one another, which makes the title of this work, I think, so appropriate, because oscillation means to move back and forth at a steady speed. So there's this idea of this light, right, this backlight and the front light. And couple this with the textures of the work, the natural and the artificial, the transparent, the opaque, the wide, the narrow, the inner, the outer, public and private, light and dark. All of this allow us to experience a variety of movements. We tend to think of buildings, I think particularly residential ones, as permanent structure. So when we own them, right, it gives us a sense of permanence. When we live in them, it gives us a sense of permanence as well. But I think lots of folks who live in Vancouver could attest, or any larger city for that matter, could attest that not much really stays in the cityscape within a century or even within a generation.
Right. Okay, Sarah. I'm ready for the next one. How about you?
Okay, sure. Let's move on to our next work. So this is going to be Dana, I apologize, Dana Qaddah. So Rick, I think this is the next slide. Yes. And then I'm going to read the text box, which has the image caption. So the artist is Dana Qaddah. The name is We're Not the Only Ones, but ... the special ones. The year is 2023. It is transparency on Lightbox, and the dimensions are around 63.93 centimeters to 73.32 centimeters, and courtesy of the artist and unit 17, which is a gallery here. So I guess, Amy, I'll jump right in.
Yeah, we'll zoom into that photo, Rick.
Okay, thank you. So this is our next work. It is by the artist Dana Qaddah, and it is titled We're Not the Only Ones, but ... the special ones. And it's about arm's length wide and high. So I'll start again with a description of this work. So this work includes several elements. The main image is within an image of this golden ornate frame of swirls of lines. It almost looks like branches or leaves in the swirls. For the image that is within this golden frame, so let's imagine it as being a rectangle, we'll start in the middle. So in the middle of this rectangle is a bright white horizon comprising of illustrations of flowers, branches, and leaves. And what this does is this actually divides, it helps us divide the image into a top half and a bottom half. So I'll start now from the bottom. So on the bottom half of this work is a pile of assorted nuts. So I think, pistachios, peanuts, and pecans. And it's a pile in a pyramid shape. So it's a triangular shape. On the bottom of the pyramid of nuts are some stickers or food packaging stickers. And then on the bottom of that, we have text that says, "Have a safe flight." And then on either side of the pyramid of nuts, we have these two, I think they're dishes. So they're two images of traditional Arabic cuisine dishes. So then we move on to the top half of the work. We also have various food wrappers and food packaging stickers. There's another block of text. This time it's in the top middle of the work. And it is the title again of this work, We're Not the Only Ones, but ... the special ones, in Arabic. Now, these collaged images of food and text are in front of a silver background, and the golds, the yellows, and the beige that are used throughout this work give this entire work a metallic sheen. And Amy, I'll move on to a little bit of Dana's process and the material of this physical work of art.
Sure.
Okay, so Dana Qaddah, the artist, then took a picture of this work for what is called a transparency on Lightbox. So this is an image that is printed onto a thin transparent sheet or surface, and then it is placed in front of a light box, which illuminates the picture from the back. So this allows for many details and colors to be accentuated and is often used in advertising images. because the photograph is attached to this box, it's actually very three-dimensional and sculptural. And the illumination of this work reminds me of a shrine whose contents beckon to be consumed and amplify the echoes of faraway homes. And Qaddah uses the commercial light box to elevate the original commercial context of the images. So again, the food stickers, the food wrappers, into artistic, sculptured, almost deified status. The usage of the commercial lightbox also connects Qaddah's work to the Vancouver School's photographic traditions, whose cinematic images connected their practice to minimalist sculpture and Western allegorical painting traditions. So now a little bit more cultural context and background on this work. So we're not the only ones, but ... the special ones, is at once an advertisement, a portal, and even a storefront window into food culture that spans diasporic space. The mixture of discarded consumer packaging and commercial relics are enshrined within this golden frame, which Qaddah repurposed from a ready-made diorama that originally held a scene, so a picture, of Mecca. The exchange of this frame illustrates the deep ties that crosses lands and generations, as the original owner was a childhood friend of the artist's father. And then the networks that immigrants must build and maintain, use, and repurposes the familiar signs of shared community. Qaddah's collecting of these visual images and signs also illustrate the networks of immigrant mobility, as her travels between Beirut, Lebanon, and Vancouver help bring the tangible and intangible aspects of culture into new spaces.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot going on here. And when I look at it, I think about like a traditional collage, layers of images on top of each other, different types of images. Like you said, there's wrappers, and it looks like there's like photographs that were cut out, kind of like from a menu when there's a picture of a dish on a menu, right? You cut that out, and the pile of nuts. What do you think the pyramid shape of the pile of nuts is saying? Is that in relation to Mecca in some way, or am I misinterpreting that, or does it matter because I get to interpret whatever way I want?
Yeah, I mean, I just thought that the like the shape of the nuts for me was just to kind of, I would say, differentiate a little bit between how square the rest of the image is. Again, like the main image is square. It's within almost this square frame. And then we have the variety of stickers. The food stickers are all either square or rectangular shapes. We have a couple of stickers I would say that are circular, but they're stuck to the corners of this frame, which again, it only accentuates the squareness. So I kind of just see this, I think this pile of nuts as it's a shape that starts from the bottom of the image, and then it meets the middle where we have that white floral horizon. So I think it's just for me, it's just another shape to look at, but it's also very, it's quite a large image. I mean, the nuts are larger than most of the other stickers here. And I feel that perhaps it could be alluding to how important it might be as an ingredient, perhaps, in cuisine, right? That Qaddah might have grown up with, or like to eat, or reminds her of home.
I think, and again, these food labels, I'm not quite sure what they are of. I mean, they could be labels of packaged things. So maybe there's also a juxtaposition of like raw natural foods versus packaged foods. Because you also mentioned the airplane that says, what, have a nice flight or something. So this idea of maybe sustainability, and how far one is from traditional foods, or that the representation of immigrants here in Vancouver. All of those things I think are probably relevant.
Right. I mean, a couple of the stickers show an image of pomegranates, which are also very
natural,
right, in Arabic cuisine. But also I see that there are two stickers on the side that show that says high quality. So I've seen cans and other kind of packaged goods that would you know, that would say high quality, I guess, to ensure that one can buy it and, you know, appreciate its freshness, even though it's canned and packaged. So yeah, so those seem to be a little bit more of the details specific to these stickers.
Okay. Yeah, this idea of a light box is quite interesting to me, because it would be essentially a square box with a light in it. Like, it would look like a white cube, I would imagine. And then this image is on the front of that cube, so the light sort of shines through the image.
Right. And it's really, I think for me, when I walk by it, because I love food, right? The fact that it is glowing just makes it more enticing.
Yeah, well, like you said, it's like an advertisement. I mean,
Exactly.
I even remember, you know, those advertisements that are at bus shelters, right? And they're poster size or the size of a standing body, and you're right in front of it, and it's usually they're advertising like a Rolex or something. But yeah, but it's the same kind of way of displaying the image.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. What do we got next, Sarah?
Okay, so next slide on the slideshow. Thank you, Rick, for bringing us here. I'm going to read the text box with the image caption again. So this is Isaac Thomas basketball court 2023. It's a chromogenic print. The dimensions are about 121.92 centimeters by 147.32 centimeters, and courtesy of the artist. So we'll move now to
into this one, Rick.
Yes. And we'll start with a description of the work. So the name of this work is Basketball Court, and it is the name of this work by the artist Isaac Thomas. It's one of the larger works of this exhibition. At around, the height is about, I would say, like the distance from one's legs, so from hips to feet, and the width is longer. So it would be, I would say, the distance between your chest and your feet. So what this scene is we're basically standing in the shade on a field of grass. We're in a park, and immediately in front of us is the rest of the field, and then it is the basketball court. Behind the basketball court is a row of trees, and the leaves on these trees are in very deep shades of green and purple, which to me indicates that we are at the height of summer. Some cars are driving on the street behind this row of trees, and then in the background are a couple of apartment buildings. They're probably mid-rises, I would say. One is about 4 stories. The other one goes past the canvas of this photograph, but it would be about like 15 to 16 stories. And it is a sunny day with a few clouds in the sky. The basketball court is full. There's about, I would say, 30 to 40 people in this scene. The majority are playing basketball on the basketball court, but then there are some folks who are sitting on the sidelines. They're watching this game. There's a small group that sits in the center back, almost completely shaded under a tree. And when we are focusing on the people, particularly in the basketball court, there are lots of people in just a variety of positions. So some are mid-shot, some are mid-throw, some are mid-pass with the ball, and the others are sitting, standing, staring, and crouching. And it really feels like we're kind of spectators, because, you know, we might be just walking by, we might be just waiting for our turn to jump into the game and play ourselves.
So Sarah, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Does each player have a basketball?
No, but there are, I would say,
there are more players on this court than there are in a typical basketball.
Yes.
Because it's not, you know, and while I think the photo is interesting, it's not the most interesting thing about the
Yes. Exactly. So there's about like 30 to 40 people. There's about 3 or 4 basketballs on this court. Right. And you're exactly right, Amy, because one would think, how would that's a lot of people probably playing separate games, right? So given the amount of people in this work, and they all seem to be in different positions, it kind of defies the logic of one single basketball game. So this image does raise some questions, and maybe I can answer them by going into the process, right? So this is because the photographer shot this picture for more than a year. And when Emmy was talking earlier in the intro about stitching, this is where we kind of see the combining of many photographs, because people are in their natural environment. They're being unbothered and unmediated by the photographer, yet the combination of these images, a variety of scenes over many days, still reinforces photography's constructed nature. So Isaac Thomas notes that this is a part in, I think it's in East Van. It's near the street called Kingsway. For those who are not living here in Vancouver, Kingsway is a pretty large street that cuts through the eastern side of Vancouver and a suburb known as Burnaby. So Thomas notes that Kingsway has pockets where, compared to other places in Vancouver, particularly the west side and downtown, it's relatively less developed in the streetscape and urban architecture. While many know the marketing of Vancouver focuses on these spectacular, majestic, mountainous landscapes of the North Shore and the towering blocks in downtown, it's really this image of Vancouver, this idyllic park between half-century old apartment blocks, this crisp bounce of rubber from the ball on the concrete, a place to simply gather for free for all 8 ages. That's really very familiar to those who have lived in Vancouver for a long time, and to me. So there's really a sense of community in this picture, and a sense of familiarity as well. Amy, would it be okay if I described a little bit of the print itself of the photograph?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just want to remind folks that even though this is a series of images that have been taken over a year's time, what's on our screen appears to be one photograph, right? As if when we were talking at the beginning that somebody's standing on a hill, focusing down on this basketball court and clicking their camera as if it was that simple. So there's like, to hear about the process and how much labor and how much time and effort goes into capturing all of these moments. And then I imagine the artist is sitting with thousands of photos and trying to pick out which movement of which player on the court should be added into this or stitched into this piece of work.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think for me, because I don't really understand basketball a lot, I would have just said, hey, look, everybody's sharing this court, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's so kind of nice. But then if you know basketball, you might think, hey, maybe 3 or 4 balls at the same time is not a good idea. And that's where the questions start. But again, it's seamless. It just is one photograph, which makes it so cool. And it is a photograph. The print is called a chromogenic or C print. And because I explained a little bit what the inkjet print was for the previous works, I just wanted to note that the C print, their dominant photographic color process of the 20th century, it's made out of 3 gelatin layers containing the colors cyan, magenta, and yellow organic dyes. Together, these dyes produce a full-colored image. From 1935 to the present day, the chromogenic process has been used to create a range of print, transparency, and film materials. We might be familiar with some common branded names like Kodacolor prints from Kodak that was introduced in 1942. Another really important one is Fuji. Used by both professionals and amateurs, chromogenic prints, also known as C prints, can be unstable and prone to color shift or fading. And here I just wanted to, because we're kind of, halfway-ish, I just wanted to just summarize a bit. Like, so far with Alexine McLeod's photographs of the building materials, which she assembles and disassembles and positions before she photographs, the collaging and layering of Dana Qaddah's food imagery, and then the stitching of multiple images here to create one photograph by Isaac Thomas. We really want to emphasize this creative process of photography is so much more than just a print and shoot, which is fun, of course, but we just wanted to note that that, you know, this involves a lot more intention and physical manipulation and juxtaposition before we even click, right? So I just wanted to highlight that.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Where do you want to go next, Sarah?
So we're going to go on to, I believe it's our 4th photograph. So when Rick brings up this next slide, I'll let everyone know that the text box says, Jaiden George. The name is Hinkiicims Digitization Studio. It's 2023. It's an inkjet print. It's 117.22 by 156.21 centimeters, and it's courtesy of the artist. So I'll jump into the description.
So we'll get Rick to zoom in.
Sorry. Yes, we'll zoom in first.
There we go.
Great. So our next work is by the artist Jaiden George, and it is titled Hinkiicims Digitization Studio. So the dimensions, again, it is about the height of one's legs from hips to feet, and the width is longer. So it's about, you know, the person's height from neck to feet. So I'll first describe the image. We are in a photography studio inside the Museum of Anthropology. And we're standing where the artist's camera is supposed to be standing. So basically the camera's view is our view. Most immediately in front of us are 2 light sources. So on our right side, extending almost to the top edge of the photograph, is a square-shaped light reflector. It is connected to a pole. So it's almost like a basketball hoop in the background, and it's slightly it's angled to lean down a little bit. And then the second light source is going to be on our left, and it's glowing from a lampshade that's open like an umbrella. And both of these light sources are pointing to the center of the photograph, where a light-skinned woman with brunette hair in a ponytail leans slightly over a table and is just adjusting the 2 Hinkiicims. So Hinkiicims is the word for wolf headdresses, and these wolf headdresses are made out of wood. So there are 2 wolf headdresses, and the one that is most clear is in profile view, which is just the side view of the wolf's face. And it's made out of this beige color wood. So it's a light colored wood. There are black outlines for the wolf's facial features, like its eyes and its nose. And the black and red outlines for its fur. And then the wolf is grinning, so we can actually see a full set of teeth. So both of these wolf headdresses are sitting on top of a table that's just covered in a white sheet. So we have a white background. So Amy, I'll move on now to talk a little bit about the artist and the context.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Jaiden George's Hinkiicims Digitization Studio is multi-layered and perhaps the most philosophical in this exhibition. Recalling the conceptually driven, intricately staged, large-scale photographs of the Vancouver School of Photography, Jaiden George's staging of 2 Hinkiicims, also known as wolf headdresses, being photographed, documented, and indexed by the Museum of Anthropology, which is here in Vancouver, is a portrait of a portrait in progress. So Jaiden is a photographer and writer of mixed Indigenous and settler ancestry from the town called Ahousaht, and he works between Tofino and Vancouver. And this image is a powerful consideration of art, displacement, and ownership. So the room that we are in now, so this photography room, is actually a very rarely visited section of museums and galleries where items are cataloged, because it's usually only accessible by staff. And when we talk about the catalog, I'd like us to think of the catalog or an index as an anthropological act of organization, which reserves power almost all to the cataloger. So in this case, it would be the museum or the museum staff. And the objects that are being cataloged actually remain quite passive. The objects are mediated by the museum employees and the camera, as it is in this image. An employee, the collections coordinator perhaps is mid-work. She's adjusting the object, the lighting, the set. She's fussing over the object with both maternal care and sterile professionalism. Yet the artist Jaiden George notes the fraught provenance or origin of some of these cultural items, some of which are stolen, as one of these wolf head dresses was stolen from his home of Ahouset, the village from which George's family comes from, and journeyed through the hands of many collectors, ultimately now housed at the Museum of Anthropology.
Sarah, do you have any idea what the Museum of Anthropology is doing to join in Truth and Reconciliation? This goes back to my land acknowledgement thoughts about, like, I understand that, for example, they provide free tickets to Indigenous folks, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. So I myself, I do apologize. I'm not as familiar with the Museum of Anthropology. Just so everyone knows that it is attached to one of our larger universities here, the University of British Columbia, which is our province. And I know that for some repatriation, so repatriation is a policy that many museums here in North America are committing to, particularly if they know or they find that some of their cultural items were stolen. So a lot of this would be working with the Indigenous communities from which these works were stolen to repatriate or to give back to. I know that in the United States, there are certain standards for repatriation for museums, and even higher standards for museums that are attached to teaching institutions, which would be the case here. Particularly for the Museum of Anthropology, if anybody has visited, there are so many items that do come from Indigenous communities, whether through the right means or not, I'm not sure, but I'm sure that MOA will have like channels of communications open to different Indigenous communities. More so, we actually hear about these efforts from the Royal BC Museum, which is on Vancouver Island, which has some similar issues. But personally, I'm not familiar with the exact policies that MOA has. But
I think it was one of the things that was talked about in the decolonization toolkit workshop that I just took, which was the fact that the Museum of Anthropology provides tickets free of charge for Indigenous folks, because essentially they're coming perhaps to view artifacts that were part of their family lineage.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's a part of what they're doing to acknowledge truth and reconciliation, because a part of truth and reconciliation is action. And what does that look like from a large perspective, but also just like a day-to-day perspective, right? So I will share that and
that is great.
learning.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Yeah, this is a really interesting sort of behind the scenes look.
Exactly. Yeah.
What it feels like to be in the room with somebody who's, cataloging these things so that we have documentation of them. And I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those very interesting works that also asks us to think about the history of photography, right? It also has this kind of historical context of wanting to remember things and catalog things. So I find it's very poignant that Jaiden brings these ideas back of what photography can and cannot do when it comes to indexing and listing and remembering things.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we move on?
Yes. And
last artist?
Rick will bring us to our last artist, and we have two works here. So I'm just going to read the text box, and these two works they share the same text box, so we'll describe more in just a second. So the artist's name is Jin-Me Yoon. The titles of these two works are Attunement Above and Below, and it's from the Listening in Place series, 2022, Chromogenic or C prints again. And for the first work that we'll talk about is 83.82 by 128.27 centimeters. The second work is smaller at 55.88 by 85.09 centimeters. And it's courtesy of the artist. And then we also have a line here that says the photograph of the photograph is courtesy of Rachel Topham Photography.
Okay. So Rick's going to zoom into this image.
Yes.
And Sarah is going to describe it.
Awesome. So I'll move us to the last two works here, and they're titled again Attunement Above and Below by Jin-Me Yoon, and I'll start with a description. So the first work that is on our screen of this duo, it's about arm's length in height and around legs length from hips to feet again in width. In this first work of Attunement Above and Below, we are standing in the middle of a grassy field, and we are facing a row of trees on, I would say, slightly overcast day. There are quite a few clouds in the sky. In the center is a large tree. It's called a weeping beech tree, and I'll explain what it is in just a second here. But its foliage arch from the top of the tree to a few feet, I would say maybe a foot or a foot and a half above the grass. So it kind of reminds me of a fully opened umbrella. In front of this tree is a stand on top of which a microphone is placed. And the weeping beech tree, just to explain it a little bit more, is a tree that is not native to North America. So how it would have gotten here would have been through colonialism and immigration. Its foliage covers the entire tree until the grass. And what's really cool about this tree is that any branch, if you just let it grow and the branch touches the grass, and if it continually is just basically on the ground, it will actually create roots. So it will create roots, and thus it will repopulate the environment. So under the grass and beneath the trunk is an extensive ecosystem of roots that sprawls out from the trunk of the tree. The colors of this image of this tree and the trees behind it are various shades of green and purple. Again, it kind of reminds me of the height of summer. The branches and leaves of this particular weeping beech tree is so thick that not even the sun can shine through it. So if someone were to stand beneath the tree, they would almost all be covered and shaded as its foliage cascades down to the grass. And the next image of this pair will give us a sense of what it is to be underneath this tree. So the second image of this duo is smaller. I'll just repeat the dimensions again. It's about the distance of one's elbow to fingertips in height and arm's length. So from elbow to fingers in width. I'll describe this image as now we are under this umbrella-like canopy of the weeping beech tree, and Jin-Me Yoon, the artist, is underneath here with us as well. The trunk is just on the left side of the image and just slightly to the left off center. Jin-Me Yoon, the artist herself, is crouched down. She's hunched over, and she has this prop, and this prop is kind of, I would describe it as two thick paper tubes. So they're kind of like when you finish a roll of paper towel in your kitchen, there's a tube roll that is within it. And it's kind of like these two tubes that Jin-Me Yoon holds one tube in each hand, and she holds it up to each ear. So she's crouched over, she has these two tubes held up to her ears, and it's like she's trying to listen to this tree, to maybe the tree's trunk, the foliage, the root system. Amy, I'll give some context and background of these two works next. So for me, there's a sense of playfulness and humor when I am enjoying these images, as you know, as Jin-Me Yoon uses these two thick paper tubes to listen to invisible yet seismic images from the ground, the trees, and the park. But underneath this playfulness and humor, there's such a violent uprooting underlying these pictures. In conversation with a hereditary chief of the Squamish Nation, which is one of the First Nations here in Vancouver, Chief Bill Williams, Jin-Me contemplates the dispossession of land and ways of living of local First Nations communities. Jin-Me Yoon says, and I quote, "To embody land acknowledgements is to listen, to look differently." And this park really is a specific part in Vancouver. And it's called Vanier Park, and it's an ancestral fishing ground. So it used to be the fishing ground of the Squamish First Nation. The ancestral Squamish settlement was called Sanok. And the history of this place is that it was burned to the ground by the provincial government. And then the provincial government turned this, or I guess the federal government, if you will, turned this site into a station of the Royal Canadian Air Force. And now this park is a fixed location of tourism and leisure, including being home to 3 museums, notably the Museum of Vancouver. So I think it's really important to also note, right, that colonialism is very pronounced in the works of Jin-Me Yoon. And this Listening in Place series, shows us a specific place and the underlying history that we might not immediately experience without the context.
Yeah, I think that's a really important note, right? Because when you're enjoying these patches of land, when you're based in Vancouver, the context of knowing where the land originated, who are the caretakers of the land, what the land was used for, is a really important part of our history to acknowledge that. And when I share the witnessing of these photos through you, Sarah, this idea that the artist is listening to what is around her, is paying attention to the land, is making a relationship with the land, and how important that work is to do.
Yeah, I think absolutely, Amy. And I think something else that really occurred to me right now is the sense of respect.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the times us humans, we just walk on the land, we use the land, we're physically on top of the land, but to crouch down, right, to the level of the ground, to listen to it is really, really, it's very, very respectful. I think it's really an act of respect. Yeah.
Sarah, are there things that you do, like after witnessing
Mm-hmm.
these types of photos and learning about traditional stolen lands that these photos are taken on, and I don't know, does it cultivate in you some way of connecting with the land, and if so, how do you connect with the land? Because I
Yeah,
think as settlers, that's what part of what we're asked to do, is to be
absolutely.
respectful. Yeah.
I just want to say that I think that's such a great question, because Amy, at the beginning of tonight's talk, you mentioned a little bit about, making sure that land acknowledgements are not just set, right, as a formality. And something that I really appreciate with VocalEye is that every time we have an event, there is such relevance and research and just relation that is put into a land acknowledgement. And what you said tonight, and going through these images again, I realized that land is often a concept that it's not acted out. So for me, I can read what I wrote, I can read the the information, I can talk about, I can use the language, right, and talk about the land and hearing the land. But all of these images remind me that the land is physical. It's a physical thing that I have to go out every day and actually remind myself that I am interacting with. I mean, for Jin-Me Yoon's work, it could be the physical land, but for other works like Jaiden George, right? That's it's inherently in the object. And then for other works like Isaac Thomas, it's in the relationships of the spaces that we use in that basketball court, right? So I think for me, land is something that I have to constantly remind myself that I have a relationship to. It's not just around me, it's not just for me to walk through and walk back, but these images really ask me to kind of slow down and and contemplate and be a little bit more intentional with how I react and how I interact with things. But thank you for giving me that chance to say it out, because I feel like I am experiencing it a bit, but I didn't know how to explain it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It forces me to have just a deeper connection.
Yeah, some of the things that I've experienced recently is um, being able to be near tree life and just take a moment and feel the bark on the tree.
Yeah.
Which again is something that, like, we pass by trees all the time.
Yeah.
We don't take a moment to just like, oh yeah, there's a tree. What is this tree all about?
Right.
And it feels like a small act, but it feels purposeful to take a moment, almost meditative in a way, to take a moment in the middle of a busy urban landscape to just be like, oh, there's a tree. Here's the bark. It's rough in my hand. Oh, there's a knot in the tree, right? And then one of the things that I have been doing my whole life is I pick up litter. It's a little bit harder as a blind person because I don't see it the same way that I used to. But when I come across something that somebody has left, I put it in a garbage can, or I recycle it or whatever, because I feel like that is a part of what I can do to take care of the land. And also what I can do is not litter, right? To take my garbage back home and to recycle it, or to, that kind of thing. So I think there's sort of day-to-day actionable things that we can all do that means that we are caring for this land.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. Yeah. So Rick can take down the photo images now, and it's just Sarah and I in the space. But I also want to just invite folks who are in the room, if they want to ask questions of Sarah, if they want any clarification on some of the images, want to share something that resonated with them, or talk about how you are thinking about the land that you may be settled on, and if something has sparked for you, that would be like, we have a hand already. All right, so it's Megan. Megan, go ahead and unmute yourself.
For me, I like that. When you say connect with the land, it's really cool. When you said about the weeping beech tree, do you know what country that actually came from? Was it from England, or I know it was colonialism, but what part of the country
that
would actually where it actually come from?
That is a great question, and thank you for asking. It is, and I'm cheating here. I'm looking.
Are you using your Google machine?
So it is from England, I believe.
I knew it.
Yeah,
it is a part of England.
Let me just check. It is so it says the original tree was found in the grounds of an English park, and then it was propagated by grafting, which means you had to take a branch and then attach it to a root source. So I'm going to do some more research, but I'll try to get back to you. But somewhere in England, the beech tree itself is European. So like the broader would be all over. Yeah, but this one is from England.
Nice. I love it, because I've been to England, so I didn't see any weeping beech trees. I might have seen it when I was going on the overhead pass from Heathrow, Gatwick to London, but you never know. I've never. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I loved it. Thank you.
Yeah, and now it's across North America. So
everywhere. Stop and appreciate a tree now and then. Hey, Megan? You got lots of trees in your area.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, you're right. Now we got some British history and European history all clung together into one. The bark is from Europe and the branches are from England. So European England is like two countries into one. Nice. I love it. Thank you.
All right. Lori has a hand. So go ahead, Lori. And
audio now unmuted. Okay, first, when you talk about trees, Amy, you know, because I do a lot of hiking with my group I hang out with,
Yes.
we
Yeah.
always stop and look at different trees on our hikes, you know, bay laurel trees, redwoods and all that. And we do stop and look at them and feel how the tree feels and everything. So when you mention that, you know, I always think of that when we go out hiking. We do a lot of that, feel what trees look like, try to get the history of the tree and everything when we're doing our hikes.
So have you experienced like a favorite tree in your hikes, Lori?
I like the redwoods.
You like the redwoods?
I
Okay.
really do like the redwoods. There's a place called Muir Woods here in Northern California, and they have huge, big old redwoods that you can go and feel and just really appreciate how old they are and everything and stuff. So I enjoy that. I enjoy feeling those, you know, when we get a chance to do it. But I like all kinds of trees. There's no poison ivy. But I would say for the two pictures that I liked, I thought the one with the nuts in it was kind of interesting with all the
Yeah.
labels on it and everything. And that basketball one, it's like that. I see why it took him a year to do it, because, you know, making a decision on what you wanted to do, and you normally don't have that many people on a basketball court.
Yeah, you're right. It's kind of a trick when you look at it, because it's not what you expect. And then
No.
as Sarah says, then you have to say to yourself, okay, something's not right here.
Yeah, you
And
have
then
to
you notice there's more than one basketball. Okay, something's really not right here. And then when you learn about the process, that's for me almost more interesting than the photo.
You kind of have to take a double look. But Sarah, does it take time for a lot of these artists to put with the nuts and everything? Did that take a long time to put that together?
I'm not very familiar with like the I would say like the process, like how long the process was for every artist, but I do know that Emmy and assistant curator Chelsea worked with folks for a year, at least a year on this. So yeah, like from conception to the finished work, I would say at least many months, if not at least a year. So yeah, it was a lot of work that everyone did.
So it takes about a year or so for the artist to put all this together to put it on exhibit for museums, in a way.
I mean, for this one, yes, but I know for some other exhibits, you know, more than that, right? Like some exhibits get planned years and years out. So yeah, really.
Well, it's interesting, you know, and you described them very well.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Sarah was nervous about her first time doing description.
Thank you.
Yeah, and context really helps, right? Really makes a difference.
Yeah, and I love the context myself, and yeah.
What was since it was your first time describing, Sarah, what was your process around trying to write the descriptions?
Well, I think having learned audio descriptions from Steph Kirkland and you as well, Amy, I think one of the things that I noticed about myself, like a weakness, is that because my background is in art history, I'm really about the context. I've noticed that in some things that I write, the physical aspect of the work, like what the subject is or the composition is sometimes like completely not even in like my purview. So for me, the biggest thing was to make sure that I actually start from the opposite. I'm starting with what is on the screen, what is on, you know, the page, or what is on the canvas, and then I'm describing that, and then we zoom out, I guess, to the context. So that was a huge learning curve for me.
We got a hand from Tilo. I'll give Tilo just a moment to unmute.
Hello.
Hey, there's Tilo.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me long when I was just before I moved to Vancouver, in the school I was in. They were showing us how to do photography. We had to go out and find something and shoot. And then we had to learn how to develop our own film. It was in black and white at that time, but I remember the process of the chemicals we had to put in. The last chemical had to stop the print itself. But before that, there was some type of machine we had to put the negative in, and then we had to do something to put the image on there. And we couldn't actually see the image when it was, because we had to put it in these different chemicals process before it show up. And then at the end, after the process, we put it into this other machine. It was like a we could say like a photocopy machine, and it dried the print very quickly, like within a minute or so. But I realized that one process for me trying to put the picture on from that one machine, my picture was a little bit crooked. And that was because of my eyesight. But I thought the process was interesting, and I wanted to do it again. And next time they're going to do it in color. But I had to move, so I never got to do that. And I never got into photography. Never really thought that much of it, because I never thought what I could, I could had an inspiration to do anything about that. But people
Tila,
like.
Did you have the same level of sight when you were doing this work as you do now?
No, I had better sight. That time I didn't need a cane or anything. I could ride a bike and give people bikes on. My eyesight was the point just on the borderline of getting my driver's license.
Okay. Yeah.
I couldn't get it. I could see a car maybe about 60, 80 yards, but even at night was good, but not now. I can't see nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting. I enjoyed it though.
That's really interesting to hear, because I've never been in a dark room before, so kind of the idea, the process of developing.
It's an interesting process, but I don't know now. The process is probably different now.
Well, I mean, we're just so reliant on digital, so
that's what I mean. Yeah, everything
real
is
art
digital.
form to go back into a dark room, right?
Well, I was really kind of upset to hear they're going to take cursor writing out of school.
Oh yeah.
I thought, no, they did quilt writing, and they only teach that in Japan. They stopped doing that here in the 1800s.
Yeah, they've been doing that for years, I think. They've been eliminating
Yeah. And one of the things I've noticed is that blind people learned is abacus, but they also teach that in Japan, abacus.
Mm-hmm.
And not just for blind people. It's just regular people.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's my 2 cents.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Tilo.
You're welcome.
And we've got Megan again.
I found out about the origin. It was from Denmark. It was made by a Stone Age who would use beech nuts for supplies for food and supplies in a Stone Age.
That's an old tree.
Yes.
Yeah, it's traveled quite a long way. Yeah.
From Denmark. They said probably in the Viking Age, but I'm not sure.
Which is interesting, given that, the Scandinavian kind of movement into England, and then the English movement into
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Thanks, Megan. That's awesome.
You're welcome.
Love that. Awesome. So Sarah, the exhibition is over in just a couple of days. So you've been a busy person.
Thank you. Yes.
What is it that you are doing at the exhibition? What is I kind of heard a rumor that you're doing tours there.
Yeah, so I did a tour last week, which went quite well. One thing, Amy, that I have learned is that you can write down everything you want to say, and you still won't have enough time to say everything.
Yes.
So you have to pick. You really have to pick exactly what is the most important. What's interesting is I love tours because everybody comes and teaches me something new. And it's really interesting. We were standing in front of a photograph that wasn't part of our tour tonight, but it was something that was just right in front of me that I didn't know what it was. And I guess I just started to, you know, fill in the blanks with everything on the background. And then somebody on my tour said, this is a sign and this sign means a lot to this image. And it just completely opened, you know, the interpretation up for me once again. But yeah, the tours are great. It's just that, you know, the building isn't open all the time, and it is a commercial built building, so we really have to be kind of mindful about what times it's open, and it might not, you know, it might not coincide with everybody else's schedules for when to best book a tour, but hopefully more tours in the future.
What have been some of the highlights for you with this festival?
So Amy, thank you for asking. One of the things that for me was so huge was, I am very guilty of this, I am exactly the point and shoot type of a person.
Me too.
I'm actually, I think for me, I'm just real. I feel like photography actually demands a lot of patience, which to me, I just get really anxious about. And I'm like, I need to take a picture and that's it. Like I can't stay and wait for the perfect time. So just to have like everybody be so creative with what this medium can do really just challenge the way that I think about this. And also one of the other things is just meeting some of these newer artists. It's you know, Emmy mentioned that we're known around the world for that Vancouver School of Photography, and the folks in there are, you know, are in their 60s and 70s, I'm guessing now. So just to see how strong the emerging artists are, the ones that are like in their 20s, and not just by age, but like when they started their career as well. I think we have a really great crop, and just to kind of get to know them has been really an honorable and like an honored situation.
I just purchased my first professional camera, which I don't know how to use. but I have a photography mentor who is like setting up all the dials and all the kinds of things, so that it's really for me, because none of those things are accessible. It's not voiceover accessible. It's not, buttons aren't really tactile. It's very difficult to find an accessible camera. So I haven't even had a chance to take it out for a spin yet. But as I know that we might be having a little bit of nicer weather this weekend, perhaps there might be an opportunity to do that. But so I'm interested in photography, and I also, like, just my own curiosity would be, any of these like emerging or professional artists that are doing this fabulous work want to have, like, you know, spend a day with a blind person, or like, how, you know what I mean, like where can we mentor, where can we like just play for a day? I'm not saying that I want to, you know, focus my career and do this as a career, but I would love to just experience the medium for a day or a weekend or something, and just that's what that's like, because I find it fascinating.
I think the education component of this is really potent, and I think this would be something that would be part of like this exhibition month, because in April I know that we have lots of like auxiliary events. So these would be some events from like other galleries or groups that are specifically based on lens-based practices. So these would be some kinds of events that could potentially run in April during the exhibition month. So that would be really fun, and yeah, and I'll bring it back to the team. I think just going outside and playing with the equipment that you have is one of the best ways to learn. So
yeah. I hope so. Fingers crossed to the universe. I hope. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Sarah, it's been a real pleasure learning a bit about capture photography, and you sharing the Here and Now Festival, the Capture Photography Festival entitled Here and Now. Oh geez, I'm chewing on my tongue tonight. But I think that it's a lovely introduction. Oh, look, we have another hand. Oh, I'm speaking too soon. Louise, come on in and share your comment or your thoughts or your questions. Let's give Louise a moment.
Sorry, so I had to wait for I had to get my husband to make sure he was not, so it wasn't giving background noise for the video, for the YouTube channel. Okay. No problem. Well, two things. I love Muir Woods, because Muir Woods, I actually have a picture of being by some trees that are very interesting there. And actually, there's one up on the porch that is so interesting, that is just unique. My dog, a couple of my dog's pictures have been taken there. And Muir Woods, you've actually seen deer in that. But I was going to say about photography, you know, putting something into that when I could see to do it. And I especially remember, I don't even remember what grade it was in, grade 6 or grade 7. Grade 6, I think it was. I had a teacher who made us make homemade cameras, and we had a dark room.
Oh, cool.
At the school, we could go in and turn off the lights and develop the pictures. And interestingly enough, some of the things you take without even realizing it's in the focus that you don't see when you're visually impaired.
Yeah.
It was so unique. But I had more vision in those days. But it was so unique that I was like, this is, you know, I love picture. I love color. Always have loved color. And the more color it has, the better it is. And Sarah, tonight you brought color, and I was eating dinner. So yeah, you may entertain me for my dinner with
dinner and a show, Louise. Dinner and a show.
And a show, yeah.
Nice.
So, but you know, you're doing a fantastic job describing, and you know, it is, you know, and getting a length of something in your head to say how long it is. You know, you look at your arm, you sit there and say, well, my arm might be shorter than someone else's arm. My leg might be longer than someone else's leg. I was laughing at you a little bit, but I was having a good chuckle. The fact that you're basing it on the base average person.
Yeah,
you know,
we do that a lot, Louise. Can you compute 23.24 centimeters?
No.
Right? So I don't think it matters exactly how long somebody's arm is. It's a reference, right?
Yes, it is.
It helps us root that. Yeah.
And it was just funny listening to it, because I'm sitting there using my hands at the time and I'm thinking, geez, from my hand up to this point, it's, you know, but it was the color and the fact that Vancouver is so unique. In fact, down in Stanley Park, there's some beautiful totem poles that are made out of wood at one time. I don't know if they're still there.
Good question.
You know, they were back in the 90s. They were beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, people who can carve and make things into wood. Oh, it's something I want to go into looking into more after I move and maybe have a few pieces, because I love wood. I love the feel of wood and the carving of a wood.
It's a real tactile medium.
Yes, it is. And tactile is something I love. So.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of really lovely Indigenous artists that that we could maybe connect you to that might do some carvings. Some that have been in the space before. Yeah.
But I just wanted to say thank you, Sarah. Funny to have you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Louise. All right. Well, before we say our official goodnight, Sarah, would you like to do a prize draw?
Love to.
This is a very special prize, and we have a couple of them, not for tonight, but one for tonight, but we may do a couple more as we move forward. And this is a CD of the music from the musical Hey Viola. Is a musical that we just saw here at the Gateway last week, the Gateway Theater in Richmond, written by an artist named Crystal. She has personally signed them to VocalEye with love from Crystal. And she is singing songs from the 40s, 50s, 60s era in storytelling. And so this is the music from, so a lot of folks in the space will know this music well, and it's gorgeous. So Sarah, we have Sarah in the space. We have two Sarahs, two squares and two Sarahs, one with an H and one with no H.
All the Sarahs are represented.
That's right. So Sarah B, you've got all the names of folks, and Sarah W, you're gonna pull a name. So I'll leave it to the two of you.
Sarah, I'm just shouting out a word, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just gonna move my hand until you say the word.
Okay. Well, capture.
Oh, what a word. We have Marie Tullett.
Marie, wonderful. Congratulations, Marie. We're gonna get your address and we're gonna send you a copy of this beautiful CD. So stay tuned for that. As we were talking in our sort of pre-show social chit chat about how people identify what things are in their packages, I like to put a little tactile strip on
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think you'll really love this CD. The music was so gorgeous, Marie. So I think you'll
Oh,
really
I'm sure I will. Yes.
Yeah. And of course, it's personally signed. Not that we can see it, but you know that the artist signed it with love because I told her that we were going to give it to some blind folks. So.
Hilo has left the meeting alert.
Yeah. Awesome. With that, Sarah, just another great big thank you to you for joining us in the space and being our guide through the Capture Photography Festival.
Now unmuted.
Happy 10th anniversary.
Thank you. And we'll be back. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
VocalEye, vocaleye.ca. Special thanks to our funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, the British Columbia Arts Council, the Province of British Columbia, and the City of Vancouver.